Some businesses are facing tough economic times. This has not spared the restaurant, takeaway and catering sector, which are rather sectors that are experiencing low sales, and this may have serious implications for retail property. A weak sales growth rate in the third quarter suggests that retailers had a tough third quarter compared to the second quarter of this year. This indicates a possible further decline in sales, where net profit before taxation had already plummeted in value by minus 13.7%. John Loos is property strategist at FNB Commercial Property Finance. And of course, John, thank you very much for coming. Perhaps let's start just on the story of inflation. This number couldn't have come at the right time.
Yeah, 3.7, that's ideal with the MPC sitting at the moment. Even before this number, though, 4.1 is a very low number, the previous month's number. We had been expecting a rate cut even before the release of this number. I think this makes for a very compelling argument for a 25 basis point rate cut tomorrow.
Whilst we are still on the rate cut, other people were saying that they would not even price in a rate cut in case things don't go their way, economically speaking, given that things have been tough for the consumer. So is it a scenario of even if it doesn't change or go down, it's okay?
Well, I think any relief for the consumer at the moment would be nice. There are more people that are indebted than people who are earning interest. But certainly, let's put it this way, the biggest challenges facing the consumer at the moment are not really interest rates. Interest rates by our historic standards are relatively low. It's more now about economic growth, employment growth, income growth. Those are the real sources of pressure on the consumer at the moment. Interest rates are a bit of a sideshow, dare I say it.
So now, what does this say when it comes to the tough times that the restaurant, catering sectors are concerned, when you look at the way the property sector will be affected?
Yeah, this is another part of retail. What we saw last week already was the September goods retail figures being released, and for the third quarter they're down to around about 0.2% in real terms and fairly low in nominal terms. So we know goods retail is already growing very weakly. Now the third quarter picture gets completed by the restaurants, takeaways and catering growth. In nominal terms, 4% year on year. It was about 8% in the second quarter. So this is tougher times for retailers coming. We've already seen that profitability, as you mentioned, for the retail, wholesale, trade, catering and accommodation sector. Profits declined by 13.7% for the 4 quarters to second quarter this year. And it looks like, judging by the way all the food and beverages retail is going and the goods retail together, that profitability could come under even more pressure. And that obviously filters through to demand for retail property. So it's a period of pressure now for the retail property sector, which already has rising vacancy rates and incomes that are under pressure.
So what do the coming weeks and months mean? Is there going to be an uptick, given that there's been a consumer relief of inflation going down? Would there be some stimulation so that the people who go to restaurants can buy more food and more drinks?
Well, every little bit helps, I guess, but I'm not expecting to see any meaningful improvement in the near term in either GDP growth, for that matter. We do have a slight projection of slightly faster GDP growth next year, but we're talking 0.3 this year to 0.7 next year. That's not sufficient to fuel additional property demand or space demand in the retail sector. It's still weak. It's about the structural constraints on this economy that are just not being addressed fast enough for our liking. We know them all. It's about an electricity sector. It's about government debt that's rising. It's about already high household debt. So even if you lower interest rates, you don't get a big surge in consumer spending. There is this myriad of structural constraints that's dragging economic growth. That filters through to employment growth and to income growth. So for the time being, no, even with a minor interest rate reduction, still pressure on the consumer for the foreseeable future, still weak consumer confidence, and still retail property that remains under pressure.
So when you refer to the electricity sector, we have this current issue of a mixed reaction towards the appointment of the new CEO. And other people are saying that, look, qualifications and the issue of his skin color doesn't matter. It's neither here nor there. We should focus on turning Eskom around, making it profitable and dealing with the problems that are there. And we need somebody who is very competent to do that. What's your take?
Well, certainly I'm not qualified on the person. I don't pretend to know his competencies. From what Minister Gordon says, it's a good appointment, but there are the opponents to it. Certainly, it is extremely urgent that we turn Eskom around. Not only because a modern economy needs reliable electricity, but also because we are now incurring large amounts of government debt. The government debt to GDP ratio is rising steadily, and it's more bailouts. It was SAA bailouts, now it's Eskom bailouts. The problem has been becoming worse. And ultimately, if your debt to GDP ratio carries on riding, at some point you default. That's the reality. Where you default, that's debatable, but at some point you probably will default. And a national default has disastrous consequences for borrowing costs in future.
Yeah. So talking about disastrous consequences, is that what we should expect when it comes to SAA and the ongoing strike there?
What disastrous consequences?
For SAA now, and you mean it's getting worse now.
This is a tough one. Yeah, this is quite a serious showdown at the moment. And both sides have their reasons as to where the problems lie. Once again, I'm not an airline expert either, but the bailouts have been going on for many years. Reports that I've read talk about SAA being overstaffed relative to other airlines and uncompetitive as a result. If that's true, then I guess what SAA says about less staff being required, there may be truth in it. So either way, it's we know that it's not cost effective, it's not competitive, it's not running profitably, and it's sucking in bailouts that really government cannot afford at the moment with its rising debt burden.
Right, John, thank you very much for making time.
It's a pleasure.
Right. John Loos is property strategist at FNB Commercial Property Finance, taking us up to us about the current development in the world of business. Let's take a break.